Welcome, friends, to the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And we are off this week, and we'll be releasing our previous Patreon exclusive called The Winter Dragon, which was a pretty wild adaptation in the sense that it was wildly bad of The Wheel of Time.
Wild situation, right? It was like a rights, retention of rights, basically, was the move.
Right. So some of you may have heard of this if you're a Wheel of Time fan. If not, basically there was this company that had the rights to The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and they wanted to maintain it, and so they slapped together this pilot and released it at like 2:30 in the morning. We get into it in this episode, talk about all the crazy stuff that went on, including like a tragic twist that I didn't see coming. So stay tuned for that. It ends up being a pretty interesting episode, in my opinion. So if you're just curious about it, you don't need to have even seen this Winter Dragon thing. We just talk about it, and you can kind of find out about it, and then you can decide if you want to go check it out, which is not really worth watching, but it's fun to talk about, and I think it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and like with the state of Wheel of Time, I hope we get some news soon about a possible next season. I was excited at the time, and then watching this version made me just like squirm, and I'm like, what's going on here? Why?
Yeah.
It was obviously pre the Amazon show, but Wheel of Time, that was a fun time and a fun project for us. So it'll be fun for everybody to get a chance to hear this wacky other adaptation that exists.
Yeah. So before that episode, let's get through a couple bits of housekeeping. First off, we wanted to go ahead and announce our new quarterly project is coming up for our second quarter of the year. We did last quarter, we ended up doing Twilight. That was a community selection. We're coming up to another one. And what I wanted to do this time is something we've been talking about with some of our listeners is we keep having people suggesting TV shows. And that's just tricky for us to do. It tends to be a little bit longer coverage. We ended up usually doing at least 3 weeks. So I wanted to do a special quarterly call for TV show adaptations. And here are the parameters. It needs to be based off of a fiction novel, and the show, we can only do one season. It can either be a miniseries or the first season of a show. We don't want to do any multiple season things. We don't
no
have time
network
for that.
shows either. No 24 episode seasons. All right.
Yeah, ideally, like 12 episodes or less would be great. 8 would be perfect. Somewhere in that range. So with those parameters in mind, we're going to go ahead and put a post up on Patreon. That post you'll be able to comment on, and then I want you to like any comment that you agree with as something that you would like to hear, and then we'll take all of those suggestions, take the 4, usually it's 4, that have the most votes. We'll put those on a final poll for our patrons to choose from. But we're going to go ahead and get that going now, and then our quarterly project will be coming out sometime in June. So look for that. But before that, we've got 2 things coming up, and we wanted to go ahead and announce our very next project so you can get excited for it and maybe do some reading. We are going to be getting into Shawshank Redemption, which is one that I feel like has been on our horizon for a long time. We've always known we might go to this like different kind of adaptation from Stephen King. We did The Body, and we got a sense of like the other kinds of stuff that he can do. But the Shawshank Redemption, a lot of people say it's their favorite movie.
Yeah, I like the movie a lot. It'll be fun to talk about it. Frank Darabont directed. It's different for King too. It's not necessarily horror. I think it'll be interesting to see if there's elements of horror that he kind of puts into the prison system.
I'm sure there's darkness in it. Yeah.
But I've never read the novel. I've seen the movie, and like you said, many people have told me in the past that it's their favorite movie. So it's a popular one to be your favorite movie.
Yeah, I think it's a novella, and it's called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. I think it's in a collection. We'll find out more about that. We're going to do an episode devoted to that novella first, and then we'll follow it up with the film episode. So look forward to that. And for now, just enjoy this former Patreon exclusive. This week we are covering Winter Dragon, the pilot for another Wheel of Time show that never was. What year did this thing come out in? I forgot to write that down.
2015.
2015, so not that long ago. And it is on YouTube. Quality isn't super great, but it is on there. You can watch it and get a feel for what we're about to talk about. But honestly, you don't really need to. I think we're going to kind of explain it pretty thoroughly, and you can get a feel for it, and it'll just be if you're curious. You can go check it out.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty much blown away by this. It was so good.
Oh, yeah.
So it really felt like they understood the material.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Are you a big fan of like community theater?
Yes.
Because that's what it felt like to me.
Expectations are funny, and I thought that this was going to be the worst piece of garbage I've ever seen in my entire life, and it might have been, but it was better shot than I thought like it was going to be.
Yeah, there was some surprising stuff where I was like, okay, I kind of thought it was going to be even more of a dumpster fire than it was. I'll agree with you there.
They went and got like a crew that clearly knew how to light a scene, at least.
Yeah, it was a little stagey. I don't know. The community theater thing kept striking me. It felt thrown together.
Yes, I found out they shot this entire thing in one day.
I believe that.
Yeah, for sure. And if you've ever been on a set and you know what it's like, it was 14 hours for a crew, and they have to move all the equipment in, get everything in place, and then the director has to deliver their vision to the director of photography, and usually you have prep time, and I assume that I actually know for a fact they had prep time on this, so everybody knows going in what's going to happen and how things are going to happen. But the G&E crew has to set up lighting. The camera crew has to get the camera in place, and we have to get the actors in place, and everything has to be costuming has to be done. Set design has to be completed, and then you light the scene, and then you look at it through the camera, and if it looks how you want it to be, then you start the scene, right? That it's a very slow process, and so to be able to like put together 22 minutes worth, which it's a sitcom. Sitcoms don't shoot everything in one day, and sitcoms are less. They're very flat lighting, sometimes on a stage, and they just roll the camera. And so it's crazy to think of an entire crew having to go through. I'm sure that this crew thinks of this as the hardest day they've ever had.
Yeah, I didn't think about all that behind the scenes stuff that must have gone into it, but it totally makes sense with the product we got. And when I was saying community theater earlier, I'm not taking a jab at community theater, because it is what it is, and it's, you know what I mean, it's enjoyable for what it is. But what you don't do is record that and release it as a pilot for a television show. And the performances just felt like people had read the script once before they performed it, maybe twice.
Right.
And they were just kind of giving it, like, the actors are capable. They're like giving it a go, but it wasn't something they were taking super seriously.
Right.
Because I think everyone kind of knew this was a farce, is my guess.
Yeah, it's a one-day gig, so a lot of things, a lot of red flags are popping up, and then also, like, we're going to get into this, but there's some shady shit that went on with this. And, one of the red flags for me right away is I knew going in that it was sort of a rights dispute thing. We talked about it in our Wheel of Time, our Eye of the World coverage. Seeing people who are the prominent actors being producers is a dead giveaway of, okay, so they paid them a lot of money, and then they also made them producers, so that if this did by some miracle take off and people were interested in seeing more, that they could be on as producers and have creative control, could get bigger paychecks, like all kinds of stuff. Is
there any sort of like resume padding stuff, like, oh look, I've been a producer before on something?
It could be. Yeah, totally could be. I saw Billy Zane as a producer, and I was like, all right, so money. I'm sure there's back end deals.
I recognize that name, but I couldn't tell which of the two he was, of the two speaking roles. Which one was Billy Zane?
He was Ishmael, or however you say the bad guy.
Okay. Yeah, it was a slightly meatier role. I figured it was probably him. Yeah. Where do I know that name from? Is
Billy
he famous
Zane?
From something? Yeah.
Oh my God. Titanic probably most famously. He is
he's the bad guy in that?
He's the bad guy. He's like a competitor to Jack.
Oh, he looked pretty different here. I guess it's been a long time.
He was in The Phantom. Have you ever seen The Phantom?
Yeah, I have seen The Phantom.
Yeah.
Now that you say that, I'm like, okay, I can picture that's who that was. Again, it's kind of grainy, like the version we watched. We did watch a second fan cut called The Dusty Wheel, which we'll talk about maybe towards the end. And that was actually better quality. So one of the benefits from it was I was able to see the scenes a little better, what was left of them. But I guess before we get into more behind the scenes stuff, what were some of your observations, I guess?
Well, not well shot, but surprisingly well shot.
Competently shot, I guess maybe would be safer to say. I agree. It seems like the people who are working on it probably know what they're doing.
They're professionals.
They're just doing it fast.
Right. And so that was surprising to me. I think it's so weird to, out of context, go with this I know it's the beginning of the book, but to go with this part of the story to represent a Wheel of Time adaptation, it's bizarre, and it doesn't even slightly feel like it's representing what a fantasy story like Wheel of Time has going on for it.
It is funny that about I think like 3 or 4 minutes of the 22-minute runtime is just a voiceover of a woman reading basically from the book. And it's over graphics that look like they were made in like the 90s. Would be my best guess for when these graphics look like something from like the movie Spawn. I don't know if you remember how the graphics looked in that movie. It kind of looked like that.
I would say Spawn had better graphics than this. This literally looked like somebody's first time opening up like a After Effects type software and creating just like a spinning wheel with flames on it, and then they put like a logo on it. It was some of the worst I've ever seen in terms of. It was
real bad, and it's just those opening. It's just that opening cinematic-y looking thing, not cinematic, whatever like title card,
right?
I guess.
Well, they were going for like a or a Game of Thrones type thing, right? Like they wanted like the swirling of the sun and all the stuff, and so they tried to achieve that with like, look how epic this is, look at the wheel and everything. And I'm like, honestly, don't even have that. Which I think the edit that we watched took that out, because if you don't have that, you kind of can lean more into things that people actually want to look at, because that was hurting my eyes.
We'll talk about the edit. So the other thing I noticed with that is they were using tons of little icons that I think are either lifted directly from the novels or just heavily inspired by. Like it looked like someone like was just taking a photo of some of the little icons that appear in like chapters and stuff, or like at the start of different parts, or on the actual like paperbacks, and then just putting those onto a square of something that's supposed to be floating, and like here's what the dragon symbol, here's the wheel symbol, and like that, and like a snake, and like this, I don't know, different stuff like that.
Yeah.
Real bad. But I mean, I don't know how else to explain just how bad this thing was, but also weirdly not as bad as you might think. It's this weird mix, like, because like the actors are trying somewhat with what they can do. There is only 2 speaking roles, really. I mean, I guess there's some laughing, but I think that was added in post anyway. And that's why I said community theater too, because it felt like we're gonna get together, we're gonna shoot a scene.
Right.
This is not a pilot. This is a scene.
Exactly.
And it's stretched out to fill 22 minutes with as much padding as you can get. They like the guy literally wanders around and says Ileana probably 25 times.
Oh, a lot. And we didn't even mention the fact that like the first 3 minutes or so are just the names of the actors and everything with like random shots, and that was padding as well. I was like, Jesus. Yeah. So you have the intro with the voiceover, then you get their names over B-roll, and then you get to some really just like lingering shots of the area with laughing and Ileana and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Ileana? Yeah. 25, 30 times. I couldn't believe, I'm like, if he says Ileana again, I was still at the halfway point of how many times he was going to say Ileana at that point, where I was already losing my fucking patience.
Yeah.
I understand he's looking for his wife, and he says it several times in the book, but like they clearly were just like, just keep walking around and yelling it for as long as we can stretch that out. And then every character it felt like in important moments, they didn't know how to like really emphasize anything or add any additional lines, so they're just like, repeat that line a few times. All these moments were repeated like 3 or 4 times for no real reason, I guess, just to add some emphasis.
I have to say, as somebody who hasn't read further than Eye of the World, but I'm dying to, I felt like I was getting spoilers. I was like, oh shit, whoa, what are we saying here? Are we like, should I not be digging into
what's in chapter 1 of the Eye of the World? I think there might have been a little bit. Okay. There might have been. I don't know.
Because it did kind of strike me. You're probably right, because it did strike me as these people probably only read the first chapter of the book.
Yeah,
and then they're like, let's make
that's what I think happened, and I think you probably have more context for what was actually said in that first chapter. So it felt new to you, is my guess, because you've actually read the book now. Yeah. But I think most of that's in the first chapter. You just kind of know what some of this shit means now.
Yeah. I was a little worried. I was like, am I getting spoilers? Am I not? I think part of it might be like, yeah, like you said, I didn't quite have the context, but some of it, like in hindsight, I'm like, holy shit, this is like, there's some big stuff that's being said there, and backstory about Lewis Theron that I didn't necessarily think about as, in the context of what they're saying in the first chapter. Yeah,
so it is the first chapter of the book where it's Lewis Theron. He's gone mad, and he's walking around, and he's getting taunted by Ishmael, and he believes his family's still alive. He's looking for Ilyana. He's looking for his children. And then he slowly is sort of tortured by Ishmael being like, you're going to remember. And basically he has the realization that not only is his family all dead, but he is the one who killed them. And then basically it ends there. It ends in a weird spot in this pilot, though, because he like ascends some stairs to go be with his family, quote unquote. And I guess that's supposed to be him going to like blow up and do Dragon Mount, which is what he does in the book.
Right.
But instead he just like goes into the room with them and they just start playing in some like sunlight, and then it rolls credits. And I was
that was like a vision of like their life together, obviously.
I know,
right?
but like what happened? Like we don't get any sense of anything happening.
They didn't have the budget for that to do anything else.
Clearly, the one effect they had where the guy was standing there and there was lightning coming out of him, it was so funny because like he doesn't move. He's like just still. They're like, just stand there still, and we're going to use some After Effects to like put some lightning on you.
Yes.
And then that's going to be the one time we show magic.
That was rough. That's another moment where it's like, don't show the graphic in the beginning, don't show the effects, just make it a character piece and make it intense and about like give the dialogue, like give what they wanted to say, and try not to, I don't know, show lightning that clearly wouldn't do anything. And then my honestly, probably my biggest problem with this, and this is again them not understanding the context of the story, is the reaction after realizing and remembering that he killed his family was so. There's nothing. And that's a big moment for an actor to get to perform. And there was no reaction.
No, he's just like, you're wrong. And then he goes like, I don't know. It seemed like he kind of understood that maybe he wasn't wrong, but then he just immediately pivots to, I'm going to go be with my family. Picks up that weird dagger thing.
Yeah.
The one prop they had.
Yep.
Other than a bunch of little dolls on the ground. I do kind of like the idea of him like going from room to room, calling for his family, you know, like he keeps kind of seeing them and it's almost like a dream. He can't quite catch up to them. It wasn't performed particularly well to like sell that to me, but the idea of that was kind of cool. I could see a version of this making it into the show because we actually haven't had this scene in the show so far, the Amazon series. And I think we will get it at some point, and hopefully like a really cool version of it. Because it's a cool scene, and that's the thing. Like, you're working off of cool material, but it's just so poorly executed. I wanted to ask you, as someone who's like worked on all different levels of film, basically, what separates this thing you just watched from like a student film that, you know what I mean, like a student project? Is there anything, or is there something about it you can tell that was something kind of professional? Right.
So one of the main things that you'll learn in like film school and everything like that is like, it's not about like what camera you have, it's about who's using it and that sort of thing. And you can tell, even with the budget and everything else they had, these people there were professionals on this set, whether they were just there to get paid or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on a student film, it's like almost all mistakes. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna watch a student film and there's gonna be a shot where something's like not exposed correctly, or the white balance is off, or something. You know what I mean? Whereas if this did exist in this show, they cut those scenes if there were accidents and mistakes. But like just the level of like the normal competencies that you have to, the threshold that you have to hit in terms of like technically creating a show or something like that, or a piece, whatever you're creating, they hit those. They hit the benchmark for like the absolute lowest of what you have to do. And then going from there, you've got talent. That's another thing that people always say. Even if you wanted to shoot a short film or whatever, you spend like half your budget on talent. Because having somebody who's notable or can perform...
I'm sure getting Billy Zane in here cost them everything, almost all the money they spent.
It had to, and it's smart, honestly. You have to do that, because otherwise, especially if nobody knows, if you're an unknown quantity, you have to have like a star to like at least get eyes on it. So some of those kinds of things in a student film, you know, Billy Zane's clearly a trained actor, and in a student film you have people who are also learning how to act, and
the guy who played Luce Theron was definitely a step down, I would say.
Yeah, but overall, I mean, like in terms of like the staircase of filmmaking, this is like a step above a student.
So is that just like professional pride? Is that like the reason that it is somewhat competent? Because couldn't couldn't this have been even worse and fulfilled the role it needed to fill?
Yeah. I think ultimately it was professional pride. I think...
But if you had a lot of professional pride, you wouldn't do this, right? Or am I wrong?
Right.
Or do they not know what they're getting into? I guess I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Are you doing a favor for someone?
Yeah.
You know, there's sometimes that somebody will come to me and be like, I need a favor, and it's not going to be a fun gig, or it's not going to be great. But in this industry, you really have to make connections and keep foster those relationships.
And there's a lot of freelancers just picking up random gigs and, looking for money here and there. So
right, because all of that builds up over time, and you get bigger gigs. And
I throw it on my resume. I worked on a pilot, and if people haven't seen it, they won't know.
Sure. Well, and that brings me to the director, Seda, I believe is how you say Seda James, birth name James Brian Howell, and this is his first
fellow James.
Yeah, this is his first thing that he directed. On this, he was credited as executive producer, editor, and director, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. But in terms of what I'm about to tell you, which this is sort of a chronological look at what was going on with the production of this show based on tweets from Seda. So know that he tweeted on December 17th about booking a directing gig, and then the production of this wrapped on February 4th, and then it aired on February 8th.
Okay, that seems very quick.
It's very quick. So let me tell you. January 19th, 2015, this is a tweet. Last prep day before shooting. Yikes. I mean, yay. January 20th, 2015. Big day today. First official as a professional, in parentheses, Hollywood director. # dreams come true.
Oh, that makes me sad.
January 22nd. This is very sad. So January 22nd, 2015, end of an epic day. # Winter Dragon. And I'm thinking of if I had the opportunity to, I'd be this excited as well, especially like an IP like Wheel of Time. Like even if it's, you're doing the best you can with what you're given. And that's crazy to be associated with Robert Jordan for an adaptation. February 1st, 2015. Funny how a 14-hour workday feels like play when you're doing what you love. February 4th, 2015. Craziest production and shortest post period ever, but we did it. Delivered picture this afternoon, and now, finally, sleep. That was February 4th, 2015. Winter Dragon aired February 8th, so he literally they shot it, he edited it, delivered it, and then reportedly, the next day, Seda was involved in a fatal car accident.
Really? Holy shit.
Yeah, the day after this aired.
Wow, now that's really sad.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's heartbreaking, and you can't even imagine how happiest time clearly for this person.
I that was a curveball, man. I did not know that. Wow. I did see that it aired during what is usually an infomercial slot.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
FXX, I think.
When they were contacted for comment, FXX said that somebody had bought up infomercial space, which is obviously not, it's in the middle of the night. It's not as expensive as a normal slot.
Yeah, 2:30 in the morning or something, right?
And they aired it right then in the middle of the night.
So why do this?
Yeah, good question.
Why take advantage of this guy who I feel really bad for now? And why do this? What could you find about that, right? It's a rights thing, right?
So I'm going to take it. I found this Wired article, I believe, that broke down. It was a kind of a report that was breaking down the month or so that this was produced and everything that was found out. So a Wheel of Time fan noticed a blurb for the pilot that appeared on his television's channel guide and posted the find on the Wheel of Time subreddit, which sent others scurrying to check FX, IMDb, and other sources. Dragonmount, the online Wheel of Time community, crashed as fans scrambled to find any available information. They didn't learn much at first. The cast included Billy Zane and apparently would only adapt the 6-page prologue to The Eye of the World. So, as more facts came to light, it became clear that this was a rights issue. The television version of 1994's famously horrible Fantastic Four movie. So there was in order to retain rights in a similar kind of way, Marvel was going to get the rights to Fantastic Four back from, I think it was Paramount or somebody like that. Don't quote me on that, but from someone. And they shot a film in record time with.
Is that one that has Chris Evans in it and stuff?
No. That is much more competently shot than.
There was another even worse Fantastic Four.
Yeah,
I didn't know about that.
Much earlier, 90s, I think.
Okay.
94. It was put a bunch of foam on somebody and call them the Thing, that kind of thing. Where as the Chris Evans one was not, they had actual effects and everything, and at the time it was a big budget movie. So yeah, that's wild. Basically, it came down to the fact that this company, Red Eagle Entertainment, which we talked about in our Wheel of Time coverage, they were the production company, and they got the rights. And it's weird how they got the rights, because I think they got it in like 2004, and they made all these promises about video game tie-ins and all these things that they were trying to do. And eventually when reached out to for comment, they actually said that like this thing that they shot was like going to still be leading into a video game that they were developing and the show. And they had it clearly, to me, people didn't know what they were doing and had somehow got the rights to one of the biggest fantasy properties potentially ever. And we're just like fumbling through it, never had any funding, lied about things. And in some desperate attempt to, because this would never hold up in a court of law, of this airing and it being good enough for the rights to remain with.
Right. Because the rights would have reverted if they hadn't used them to
I believe, Robert Jordan's estate.
Yeah.
And so for that to be the way that this happened, I don't know, it's crazy. So,
but then they sued Harriet, right? Like Robert Jordan's widow.
I think so, but they had like a back and forth. Like I think both parties sued each other. But let me read this, which is crazy too, because this is from 2007, which is before Jordan passed away. He was commented about his relationship with Red Eagle Entertainment in a blog post. He said, "I hear things now and then floating out in the air. For instance, I hear that word was floating about Comic-Con in San Diego that I am displeased with Red Eagle. Too true. Too very true. In a few more months, that last contract they have with anyone on God's green earth that so much as mentions my name will come to an end, and we can see what happens after that. You see, among other things, they forgot an old dictum of LBJ back when he was just a congressman from Texas, when he famously or infamously said, 'Don't spit in the soup, boys, we all have to eat.' Worse, Red Eagle thought they could tell me they spit in the soup or pee in it if they wanted to, and there wasn't anything I could do to stop them. You can't apologize your way out of that with me, not that they tried. There isn't enough money in the world to buy your way out of it with me, not that they tried that either. So they get no further help from me. Once they are completely out of the picture, we'll see what happens." Now, this was in 2007, weeks before Jordan passed.
Wow.
Yeah.
These guys are looking more and more like villains to me. That's pretty... I mean, it's like they bought the rights, but like, if you're not going to use them, let them fucking revert. Don't do this shit. This is shady. Like, I understand you bought the rights and, you know, so you're like, legally, these are ours to do with what we want. We paid for them. Okay. But you're clearly not using them. At that point, let them go. Like, this, it's just such a, I don't know, it seems so underhanded, but I know there's like people do anything for money, so it's frustrating.
Yeah. So he passed away, and, you know, years later, they're still holding onto the rights. In 2015, they decide to overnight shoot a pilot and release it.
That's like record time. That's
and
so
Harriet
fast.
McDougal statement, 11 a.m. the next morning. This morning brought startling news. A pilot for a Wheel of Time series, the pilot being called Winter Dragon, had appeared at 1:30 in the morning, East Coast time on FXX. It was made without my knowledge or cooperation. I never saw the script. No one associated with Bandersnatch Group, the successor in interest to James O. Rigney, was unaware of this. Bandersnatch has an existing contract with Universal Pictures that grants television rights to them until this Wednesday, February 11th, at which point these rights revert to Bandersnatch. I see no mention of Universal in the pilot, nor, I repeat, was Bandersnatch or Robert Jordan's estate informed of this in any way. I am dumbfounded by this occurrence, and I'm taking steps to prevent its reoccurrence.
Yeah, so immediately something was fishy there. And is that what they sued her over? Like, those claims, I guess?
I think that they sued her over, like, defamation or something, like,
right.
You know, they're trying to say that she's lying and said it to the public and changed court of public opinion or whatever.
Yeah, man, that's just so... I mean, it just shows you some of the shit that can go on in these industries, and this is an interesting moment of overlap, right? We talk a lot about, you know, adaptation and you know, authors selling their rights, and then things getting... So often things fall apart. Like, that happens all the time. And I was talking to some people a few days ago about how I read these news articles about something happening, and you can almost flip a coin on whether or not a year or two later you're going to hear something come of it, or you're going to be going, didn't I hear that such and such was going to be made? And then you go look it up, and like that article you read 2 years ago was the last anyone has ever said anything, and then you read somewhere that like the rights ended up reverting, or that they sold them to somebody else, or something else has happened, and and sometimes these things just never happen. You'll read these breathless articles talking about how something's coming, and then sometimes it just falls apart. But this is like a particularly egregious thing to happen. I feel like this stands out.
Absolutely. I mean, like this is like the equivalent of just like throwing a bag of dog shit on somebody's front doorstep and setting it on fire. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like this is just like, are you a child? Like, what are you doing? You're just going to shoot something, put it on, and you think that like it's going to hold up in a court of law that you like did the right, that like you're handling the property correctly. And like, this is legally what you're allowed to do. It's just wild to me. And like, I'm sure that they were just like everyone else who was associated with it other than the higher ups was just blind to the fact that like, they were given no information. They didn't know any of this stuff. I'm sure that if you ask Billy Zane, he had no idea. And then he's like, shit, I'm a fucking producer on here. So like you're dragging his name through the mud and stuff too.
Yeah. So we talked about the show, the Amazon series, over the course of several episodes. And I feel like we were pretty positive, but also we had criticisms. We had things we didn't like. We won't get into them here, but pretty mixed. But still kind of hopeful for season 2, and interested, and like you really enjoyed the book, and I enjoyed the book, revisiting the book as well. So we're interested. I would say we're definitely not haters. One thing I thought that was interesting is if you look at the comment section for this YouTube video, it is filled with show haters. There are so many people on there who hate the Amazon Prime series and are commenting basically variations of the same comment, which is, oh, this ended up being better than what Amazon did. At least these people read the book. Can't believe I'm looking at this and going, oh my God, it's actually better. And like, it's just a bunch of people talking about how this is better than Amazon's. So
hot takes, huh? These people have hot takes, and they have so many subscribers on their YouTube account.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. I was like, oh God, look at this fucking comment section. This is pretty bad.
Doesn't YouTube comment sections never cease to surprise me? Yeah,
and then, like if you're commenting positive things on this turd, like that's pretty amazing. And speaking of polishing a turd, someone decided to do a fan edit of it, which I think is slightly better. It cuts out a lot of the padding. It cuts out a lot of the repetition. It overlays a few scenes with other audio. It kind of amps up some of the ominous music, I felt like. Just things I noticed. It cuts together some of that lightning scene to where it's only kind of flashes for a moment, to where you don't get to kind of like look at how bad it looks. It did some favors for it, and then it ends in a more ominous point before he walks up the stairs into the little like heavenly moment. It ends in a more ominous, like, I'm going to make you pay kind of thing. I forget what line it was, but it was okay. But again, I don't know why anyone went through the effort of this, because it was still pretty bad, and this didn't deserve it because this thing shouldn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, like it does show you, it's a cool exercise in like what editing can do for you, right?
Sure.
And like what like the idea of coming at something from a different angle and not doing the expected thing, and how that's how editors think and they a lot of filmmakers are like, this is how I see it in my mind, and then they're like, but I'm going to give it to my editor and see what they come up with.
Yeah, and this person doesn't have the raw footage. Yeah, they're just working off of the thing we all watched, and he's editing something together. So
I would argue that it's significantly better. It's still bad. It's still the same, like you said, polishing a turd. Basically, it's not. but like it's showing like a level of.
That's something that we said in Florida growing up. I don't know if that's something other people say, but that was colloquialism or whatever.
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. So the overall though, it just like it shows more down the path of like the characters being sort of out of their element. And
I wonder
if
they took more than 24 hours to do the edit.
That's what I was going to say. I bet you this took longer than the edit that they put out. I bet you did.
And they were working with raw footage, so they theoretically had a better, like they had more to do.
They had to color correct it. They had to do some things. Potentially. I don't even know. I'm sure that they did, but
yeah.
Overall, just yeah. I mean, interesting to see another person's take on it. Doesn't make it any better. I would still never recommend somebody check it out.
If you're going to watch anything, I don't know. It's like, what are you watching it for? Do you want to give it its best chance? Then watch it's called the Dusty Wheel edit. It's like 8 minutes long. You'll get a feel for what it is at its best. but like, why? Like, it's garbage. I don't know.
You watch the original so that you can say that you have, and then the other version, like, there's no reason to show anybody the other version because it's like, did you enjoy that? And if they're like, no, then you're going to show them this and they're going to be like, I still didn't enjoy it.
Well, if you're maybe in the comments, they're going to say, better than the Amazon Prime show.
This is better than Citizen Kane. I do have one other happy note to kind of leave us off on.
Okay.
And that's the idea that on April 18th, 2016, the Robert Jordan estate issued a statement that legal discussions had resolved and that a television adaptation of The Wheel of Time was being developed with a major studio.
There you go.
So just think of the relief that Harriet McDougal feels. Like, regardless of how anybody feels about the Amazon Studios adaptation, it's a hell of a lot better than the fucking one that they released at 1:30 in the morning. And to get like some people who are actually invested in the characters and invested in the story and wanting to do like a full run of the show, like, I feel like it's a big win for the estate for sure.
And I think there's mysteries, to me at least, about the production of season 1 of Wheel of Time. I think something went sideways with the actor playing Matt, and things had to be reshot and re-edited and recobbled together. We talked about it some in our actual coverage, so I won't go into it here, but it's just interesting that like still something kind of marred the production and I think affected it. And I really hope that for season 2 that we can put all that behind us and actually just have someone's vision actually come to life without having to compromise it for some outside reason. I
mean, like, I think if you look into most shows, the first season, and especially the pilot, have a lot of things that go on. And if you can just by some miracle make it through the pilot, or if in the case of like modern streaming, if you can get your first season out and you're greenlit for a second season, huge win. And I think from there you can start to see like quality and because there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen with Wheel of Time at Amazon, I'm sure. And so for it to come out and be well received enough to where they greenlit it for a second season.
I think a third season has even been confirmed, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think in the second season, people will back off and say like, okay, they had delivered on the first season. Was it the biggest success ever of any show? No. But season 2 could continue to build on that. I mean, you even look at Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones had that marred production of their pilot. They had to reshoot it and do all that stuff. And then the first season, I think people walked away being like, that was really good. And I think, I remember at the end of season 1 being like, holy shit, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But
season 1 of Game of Thrones is way better than season 1 of Wheel of Time.
Yes,
pretty.
But my point being, it wasn't perfect and it wasn't easy the whole way.
And there was certainly a lot of worry surrounding the pilot. All right, that's going to be it, I guess. This was The Winter Dragon. If you're really curious, go check it out. At least skim through it and see what we're talking about. I guess I'm glad I know what it was now, and it was nice to be able to dig into some of the legal stuff that went on because. That's kind of scary. Like it's good to know these kind of worst case scenarios as people who are trying to work in these industries, just to kind of be aware of some of the shit that can go down, and never trust a production company is gonna like have your back. Like they're just out to make money,
It's a tough world out there for sure.
Yeah. All right. Until next time.
Keep adapting.